Hello, in this lesson we're going to be looking at 3 different types of messages and how you can use them within your application. So be right back after these few words. Hello, you're listening to Martin, and this is the next video in my series looking at getting started with OpenInsight 10. And today, as I said, we're going to be looking at 3 different types of messages. So to start off with, we're going to launch our patients form, the one that we've been working with. And normally for the date of birth control, when that changes, when we change a date, we're going to want to check the date, and then if it's a date in the future, we're going to want to warn our users because, well, we don't know when the person's been born, and if it's in the future, we can't predict that. So it's not a great example, but it will do. So what we're going to do is, because I've got 3 different solutions here, I'm going to drop on 3 separate buttons onto this form. So I'll just drop them up here for the moment. And you're probably going to want to just watch this video rather than following along, because you're going to pick one of these options that you prefer for the application and then connect that option up to the changed event on the edit line or the lost focus for the edit line, whichever event you prefer. So we've got our 3 buttons. The next thing that we want to do is to go Start and New, and we want Windows UI tools, and we want to have the message box option because we're going to create 2 messages. Now the first message that we're going to create is going to be a standard message that we'll pass some additional parameters into. So for the window title, I'm just going to call this processing error. So something generic. So we'll add that into both. Just make that a capital E. And for the text, we'll leave that blank because within code we're going to pass into this the text that we want to display on the message. It's going to be a type of information, so informational, and there's lots of different options in here. You've got a response option, and as you change the type, you'll see that the form will change, giving you additional information or additional prompts that you can complete. There's a timed option here, so this is used for pop-up toast, the little messages that pop up in the corner of screens for a few moments and then they disappear, and you just basically set up the message and then the delay in seconds that you want it to display. So we're not going to do that one. There's also a processing one. So this is processing messages that are called from the event handler, and there's also a progress bar. Now the progress bar one I'm going to look at in the next video using an application, a different application, but I'll talk about that one when we get to that point. So for the moment we just want an informational message, and we need to define how many buttons we want to display on this particular message. Now I'm just going to have an OK, because we're going to give a message that says, you know, that the date is potentially incorrect. They click OK, then they reset the date. So there's no OK and cancel. There's no yes or no or anything like that. It's just a straightforward OK. And the default button is going to be default button 1. We've only got one option anyway because we've only got one button on here. For the properties, I'm pretty much going to leave all of the formatting alone, but I will change the icon, and I'm going to change the icon to a stop sign, and as we do that we get the stop sign icon display in the window. I'm going to leave everything else the same except for center of screen. I'm going to change that to center of window so it comes up on the center of the window that we're working on. And I'm just going to set the width to, do I want to set it to 7? No, I'm going to leave that alone so OpenInsight can set the width. Now if you're going to be passing in very long amounts of text, then you might want to set that property accordingly, and we will do that in the next one. But if I were now to test run this, you'll see that it's just straightforward processing error with an icon and an OK button and no text because we're not passing anything in. So that's all okay. Null's returned, so that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save it as mp underscore underscore error underscore message. And so we'll OK that one. And then we also want to have a message that is a little bit more specific to the error condition that we're responding to. So on this particular error message, we'll have date of birth error, and I will copy and paste that into there. And I'm going to copy this in to the text, so I'll just paste that in. The date of birth cannot be a date in the future. It must either be today's date or a date in the past. Please enter a correct date. So in this instance we're going to have an informational message again. It's going to be OK, button 1, so all of that is all OK. You wouldn't want to do the suppress message display in this instance because all that will do is it will just suppress this message. So I guess if you were going to pass in your own detail but you wanted to keep the same message, then that's a case where that would be useful. For the main title for color, I'm just going to change that one to what shall we have? I think I'm going to have that as maroon if I can find it. There we go, that one there. I'm going to leave all of the others as defaults. The stop sign I'm happy with. The font, the override is all good. The central window. The width on this one, I'm going to fix that to 700. And the frame style is fixed, which is fine. You can play around with the text foreground color and background color if you wish to. But I tend to find that this gives us quite a nice look. So if you wanted to change the text background color, for instance, I'll put something glary like yellow in, and we then do a test run, then you can see how that will change. So I quite like having the white area in there rather than having sort of leery colors, but you can pretty much have whatever you want. So let's just change this back to default. And we will go to, and we don't want to do a save because obviously we've changed it and we don't want to change our MP error message. So we'll go File, Save As, and this one's going to be MP underscore MSG underscore date of birth error. I think that will do. So we'll click OK on there. And just to make sure, if you ever do this saving as, then it makes sense to open up the previous entity and just make sure that you haven't overwritten what you did before. So a quick test run shows that that's okay. Null returned. And if we do a test run on this one, then, oh, okay, I've got grey and grey there. And what I want to do is I want my text background color to be white. So we'll change that to be white. That one there. And we'll test run. And now we're back to what I want to have. Okay, so that's absolutely fine. So let's save and we'll just close those two messages. Now, I said we were going to do 3, but we've only actually created 2 messages, and the reason for that is that we're actually going to create the actual message on the fly. So for the first button, so this one here, I'm just going to change the text here to plain. I'll just call that plain for plain message. This one will be for the system message. So that's the first message that we just created, where we're going to pass in the information, and we'll have this as just as specific. I think that will work. So for the plain, if we go to the events and the click event, we'll turn on the event script, and we will paste the code into there. I'll just move this over, and we'll just go through the code. So we declare a function of message box, and we insert the message box equates, and we're going to check to make sure that the date of birth is not a date in the future. So the first thing that we'll do is we will set some variables, and I'm just going to just format this a little bit better so it's a little bit easier to read. Just bring that down. And that one. I think that's probably okay. I'm going to spend too much time formatting it. You can format it better. So what we'll do is we'll get the date. So val date is today's date. So date bracket will return today's date. The date entered. So we're going to get the value that we've put into the EDL date of birth. So the def prop. So that's this control here. So we're going to get the value from that. And then val date entered, because we're going to get the incorrect format, we need to change that format into a date format that the system can use. So basically, I think that the date format, if we get it, will be I don't know, the 22.02.2010, whereas we need the internal date, which might be 19043 or whatever. So we convert that so that it matches the dates. In fact, what I'll do is for the first time we run this, I'll put a debug statement in there so you'll be able to see how that code affects things. And then if the val date entered is greater than the val date, in other words, the date entered by the user is greater than today, then we're going to display a standard message box passing in the information that we want to use for that particular error message. So the date entered appears to be in the future. Do you want to use this date? And then the title for the window is check the date. And then we have some buttons. So we've got a yes, no, and a cancel. We've got a default button, and we're going to use the question icon on this particular message. And then if the user returns no, then we'll refer them back to the edit line for the date, and we'll set the focus to that edit line, clearing it out so that they can put a new date in there. If they say no, I want to use that date, then we're happy, so just do nothing and just move on. So if we do a save on that and we go back and we test run the form now, if I put in a date, so let's put yesterday's date in, and we run plain, then we get the debug because we put that debug statement in, and I'm looking at the local variables here. So if we do a step into, that will bring today's date, which is 18474. So it's not the 30th of July 2018. That date in internal format is 18474, and that's because, most of you will know this, in the multi-value world we picked date in the past, which was date 1, and then the second date was date 2, 3, 4 as we've gone through. So from whenever that date back in, I don't know, 1960s somewhere, we're 18,474 days on from there. And this is a part of the reason why we didn't have a problem when we ticked over for the millennium. But if we now pull in the date entered, so if I do a step into, you'll see that the date that entered that we've pulled back is 29 July 2018. So we can't do our check if val date entered is greater than val date. Well, it's not going to work because we don't have a numeric. So if I do a step into again, we do the conversion, the icon, which converts the date into yesterday. So one digit earlier. So instead of being 74, we're now 73. So I'll now just let that run and everything is all okay. Now if I were to change this date to a date in the future, so let's say the 29th of July 2022, and we click the button, we're going to drop to the debugger. But if I just do a run, then we get the check date. The date entered appears to be in the future. Do you want to use this date? Yes, no, and cancel. So this message here we haven't created. This window has come straight out of OpenInsight, and all we've done, if I go back to the code, all we have done in here is to pass in the code, the text that we want to display using this line here. So that's a way of producing a message. I'll just get rid of the debug statement out of there. This is a way of creating a message, very simple message on the screen, just using that single line of code. Now we can take that a little bit further if we want to by looking at the second button option. So this is the system button. So if we go into events and the click event for that particular button, now I'm going to copy this code in again from another area. So if I go script event and control V, and in here now, again, so it's all squidged up, we're going to declare subroutine MSG. So we haven't done our dollar insert or anything like that. We still set today's date, we still get the date that the user has entered, and we still do our conversion. So everything is still the same. We still do our if statement. If the val date entered is greater than the date, then do something. But this time what we're going to do, just widen this, is we're going to define the text as a text variable. So the date entered appears to be in the future. Please enter today's date or an earlier date. But this time we're going to call the MP error message window, the window that we created a moment ago. So if we just do a save on there and we go back to the patient's form and we do a test run, and I'll grab a date again that's in the future. Let's just do a note of that, and we do system. This time we now get the window that we have created as our default processing error window. So we get the processing error in the window title, we get our graphic, we get our titles, the processing error, and then we pass in the text from our code. Remember when we ran this in the design mode, it was a very small window with no text here. So all we've done is we've passed that in. So that's an example of running a message using a skeleton message window, if you will, passing in the text. So then we get the third one. So let me just copy that code and we'll go to the specific button and events, and we'll have a click event, and I'll just copy in that paste with a control V. So again, this time we're doing a declare subroutine MSG. We still set the variables, we still do our if statement, but this time we just call MSG at window, passing in no text, but we will pass in the name of our error message. Now this is a specific one, remember, because it contains the information for the message. So if we test run that, and we'll grab a date. Nope, don't want to do that, and we'll just do 22, and we do a specific. We now get our specific error message. This is the one that I prefer because it tells us that we're working with a date of birth, and we've got an error with a date of birth, and the date of birth cannot be a date in the future. Basically, this is the message that we created, and we can click OK, and we can then be referred back to the control, and we can clear that out if we had that code. I haven't actually got that piece of code in here on this occasion. We could drop that in. So I think on the first one here we got if return val blah blah blah, then clear it out and set the focus. I haven't got that in this bit of code. Just to keep it easy, you can drop that in and use that if you wish to. So that's 3 different ways of communicating messages to your user base using either a system message using a window that you haven't created, that was created by OpenInsight for you, by creating a standard or a skeleton error message that you save into the repository. You then call that and pass in the text that you want to display, or you handcraft your own specific error message with all of the text and everything that you want to show the user. So 3 different ways. In the next video, we'll have a look at the progress bar. In the meantime, pick whichever one of these options you prefer and hook it up to the changed event for the date of birth or the lost focus event, whichever you want. Haven't quite decided which one I'm going to do yet. I'll think about that after this video. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.